What's up, everybody? Brian Pineda here live. Todd Boss and I are here to bring you the breakdown of everything that happened in the SoCal 2025 Open presented from Fullerton, California. And man, there's a lot to talk about. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Fantasy Fastbreak, the racquetball fantasy podcast that puts you in the seat of the GM and delivers insider breakdowns you won't find anywhere else.
So, Todd, there's a lot to unpack with this tournament. Let's just break into it. Where did you catch it? What'd you see? How we doing? The ups and downs and all arounds.
So good to see you, Brian. I'm coming to you live from snowy Richmond, Virginia. The tour's just coming from sunny Fullerton. One of my big takeaways, we're going to get into the big head-to-head matchup and, of course, the big win for Conrado. But I did want to give a shout-out to Thomas Carter. I think Thomas got the biggest win of his career this past weekend. Came back and held on to an 11-8 win over Rodrigo Montoya. It's not the first time that Carter's beaten a number 5 seed, but it's probably the first time that he's beaten a 5 seed who was, arguably a better player than a 5 seed at that point in their career. So props to Thomas Carter, but of course we want to probably move on and talk about some of the other interesting matches that we saw.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's so good because, we've talked about these gatekeepers of the top 16, Thomas Carter's, the Robbies and all that kind of stuff. It's really good to see a push from Thomas Carter's game. It makes him a real threat. I tell you, when you step on the court with him because Montoya is a guy who eats at the table. You know what I mean? He's a tour winner this year. So it's a huge win. You're right. So we break into the top 16, Todd, and or I should say the 17 plus range. I had a huge bold prediction, which I think Helen Keller could see this one. I'm going to go ahead and die on this hill. None of these guys are making out of the first round. Yeah, get your violins out. I said it. None of the qualifiers were going to come through, and that's pretty much how this draw played through. I did enjoy seeing Bear play some doubles, Alejandro Bear. It was nice to see Diego Gaddick out there, and obviously Javier Gonzalez. Tour veterans that kind of travel with them, like Jim Douglas. We see a little more Cody Elkins. And obviously, it was really cool to see John Wolfe in the round of 16, but ultimately, none of these, he was already ranked 16, but none of these guys made it out. What do you think about the guys who were challenging in?
I think Gattaca pushing Gastelum 11-9 was notable to me. My pick in fantasy was picking Alejandro Bier, and he went down to Carrasco 9-7. That's not bad. Carrasco then took a game off of Jake in the next round, so so Carrasco certainly playing well this weekend. But we just didn't have the kind of draw this week that led itself to a big deep cut upset. Not with all the top juniors playing in the Dominican Republic.
Absolutely. And just a sidebar, I really would like to see the Fullerton, knowing that this is an event that's going to take place, whether it's every other year or not. If you want to make a place in the calendar that's solid that people can be consistent on, I'd really take a look at that and maybe rearrange the date, because it is awesome to see the younger players from around the world play.
Yeah. And not only that, Brian, but if you time your tournaments right, and we've seen this on tour a lot, the international players, if they can see an opportunity to, say, fly from their hometown to your tournament and then get a tournament of experience in and then immediately fly to a major event, they'll do it 10 times out of 10. And the federations will support them financially because they can make the argument that they're getting tournament prep. And so a lot of times the timing of these tournaments can be done in a way that actually greatly enhances your pro draws.
100%. I could do a whole podcast on all the tournament get up and everything like that, but ultimately we'll talk about that another time. Let's talk about this round of 16. As you mentioned, there were just some interesting setups right from the get-go. What was your take here? Who was your pick and how'd they do?
I believe my pick was Portillo because I was pretty confident that he would beat Natera, and that did turn out to be the case. Tops Natera 9-12. That matchup is getting closer. Natera had knee surgery earlier this year that he's pretty much through now. But Portillo is much better than a 9 seed. Portillo, if he was playing full-time, he's probably the number 4, number 5 ranked player on tour. And so that wasn't too big of a surprise. The big wins, of course, was as we just mentioned, Thomas Carter. And that was really the only other upset of this round
And we talked about it, right? It's not really an upset with Portillo, and that's no offense to Alan. Alan knows it as well. There's been more tried true, and there's been a lot more presence on the tour from Portillo. Natera is still breaking into that top 8, respectfully, but Portillo's had the wins. So for me, that would be a good win for Natera. Obviously, played true, even though the seeding was different. This was the only section that didn't make it a true top 16, as all the other seeded players came through, outside of, obviously, we talked about Thomas Carter coming through, and we spoke about him. I want to give him a few more seconds on this, man. I would really love to see what happens with Thomas moving forward. I'd really love to see what happens with him as he heads into a big tournament. Sioux Falls, for me, is a huge tournament coming up. It's where you're going to see a lot of players from past, present, and potentially the future that come to that event, because the host there, they play amazing host in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to all the players, the event itself, the different doubles divisions, and obviously the player party at the end. But obviously we also have the US Open coming up as well. And so as we get to these main stage events, this is what we want to see in the break, right? We're about to go into the new 2026. You want to get some going so you have something to drive you into that 2026 second half of the season.
Yeah, no, 100%. You know, just a small tangent on the U.S. Open. Cliff Swain gave an update on it on social media earlier this week. And if you're not following the U.S. Open, if you don't follow Cliff and you're not getting these updates, I highly suggest you go out and find it. He gave an update on the hotel situation. He kind of gave an overview of the courts. And I didn't know this, but, you know, so they're planning on putting the portable court into an area that's going to serve as also kind of like the player village and have the vendors, you know, kind of similar in the way that we've had U.S. Opens back in the day, you know, whether when we had it in Minneapolis or even back in Memphis. But then the main courts at the university have a couple of showcase courts that are front wall, side wall, that are kind of back to back. So you can sit here and kind of watch 2 glass sidewall matches going on at the same time, which is awesome. And I think that that's really going to enhance the experience and the entire area from your hotel to the main courts where all the amateurs will play to the show court where the pros play is all an easy walk. It's not, you don't have to get on a shuttle. You don't have to walk half a mile. So it sounds to me like the experience of the U.S. Open is going to be awesome as long as they get the financing and it continues to come to fruition.
Absolutely. And that's a good take. And I got to say something on that too. I remember speaking with Charlie Brumfield on this, may he rest in peace. And he talked about one of the things that this sport hadn't had was how these players who were at the top in their prime and how they stay through. And you see with all the other sports. And so I want to take a moment and just acknowledge Cliff for being that guy, former world number 1, perhaps one of the greatest players the sport has ever seen, in my opinion, that he has coming back. You see him coaching, you see him helping out, he shows up at events, and now he's running something this big. It's huge. And I hope he receives the overall support of racquetball from around the world.
Yeah, 100%.
So Todd, yeah. And so as we head into the quarterfinals, what was your take on what we saw here? I mean, we definitely saw some closer matches. I was really interested in the Mar and Acuna matchup, you know, as that was brewing. Interesting to see what happened with Jake. I was really surprised, and also want to tip the hat off because I mentioned it, right? Parrilla, Mania, Bredenbeck, both Bredenbecks, they need to start making a push because they've kind of just been staying where they're located in their ranking. Obviously, Mania with injury, Jake, you know, battling a little bit of injury. Sam Bredenbeck trying to make a push into that top 8, and Parrilla just kind of staying stagnant. It was good to see him come to the table in E2. What was your take?
You know, it's interesting. Parrilla getting a win over Jake 7-4. That's a big statement. And then him continuing on and putting a loss on Acuna to make it to the final. You know, we see this out of Andre. He will take some weird early losses, but then he'll show up at the next event and just blow through and make a final. So, you know, bravo to Andre there. My pick out of the 5 to 8 seeds in fantasy was Javier Mar, who fell a little bit short to Acuna, losing 11-9 in the third. If you haven't seen the tiebreaker in that match, oh my gosh, the last few points in particular, just amazing racquetball. Those guys were at the end of their string, fatigued, but still going all out, you know, multiple dives, just great racquetball to watch. But, you know, your big Obviously, and what the match that we're about to lead into was set up at the top half of the bracket, where Kane gets a win over Portillo in the first quarterfinal, 10-1. Really is pushed in the first, and then Lalo just capitulated in the second. Meanwhile, Moscoso runs into Carter, who probably was still coming off a high, having beaten Montoya in the 16s. Moscoso ramrodded him through, 5-2 to set up the match of the weekend in Kane versus Conrado.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take a little step here and get controversial. You know what? I'm really getting sick and tired of Adam losing to Parrilla. I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. I'm sick and tired of it. I think it moves him to a 7-1, something like that. Crazy, isn't it? Isn't it something like that, Todd? 7-1, and I mean, this guy has everything that Parrilla has. Very similar games. To me, Adam's a little more offensive. As we're seeing, what's more important than being offensive is consistency, and that's the domination that Parrilla has. So for me, ultimately, Parrilla getting a win over Mania, it's you look at it on paper and you're like, duh. But for me, like when you're not doing the chasing, it's easy to have a slip, right? Look at the Thomas and the Montoya matchup. Got a slip, right? Not paying attention to people who are trying to get to the top. Bust through. And then he goes on to Jake, right? Totally different game plan. And to me, this is what sets up Parrilla to have a really great tournament is he knows how to dominate the control player. And then he gets to the hard-hitting player on his surface, concrete courts, and he's able to breeze through. I mean, this is ultimately the MVP of this bottom draw. Obviously, he makes the finals, Parrilla, but the way he does it is absolutely dominating. It was incredible to watch him play this weekend.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're right. Adam is now dropped to 1-7 against Andre in his career. Beat him the first time they played professionally back at the 2020 Longhorn Open, and it's been one-way traffic for Parrilla ever since.
This leads us into the semifinals. Like I said, we can let's talk about it. Let's unpack it. Everybody saw it, couldn't believe it. The hill that I died on this one, Todd, Kane lives rent free in everybody's head. And Moscoso said, "No hablo inglés. I'm not hearing you, Pineda." There's a lot of things that I like about Moscoso, except for the obvious fact, Todd. Kane lives rent-free in his head. He came to dominate.
Yeah,
He was incredible.
So game one, Kane gets a point early. Conrado gets to serve back. Conrado ran off 12 straight points. No side out. And in that 12-point run, he missed one drive serve. He missed one drive serve the entire first game. And in that run from going from 0-1 down to 12-1 up, here's how the points went. Drive, return, kill. Drive, skipped, return. Bad skip off a return. Drive, return, left up, kill. Out of those 12 points, we saw four two-shot rallies where Conrado hit an effective drive serve and Kane couldn't even get the ball back into play. And then another 6 three-shot rallies. Drive, weak return, kill shot. Only a couple times in there did Kane even really get good wood on the return. And so I saw a display of serving that you just don't see that often on tour. After 12-1 down, Kane got the shot, got the serve back, had a couple of side outs. They traded off points, but eventually Kane kind of drove the game home, and it was 15-2 before anyone knew what hit him.
And, obviously I picked Kane to win this thing. I think what he's done on the tour has been incredible. But this moment goes to Conrado Moscoso. There is no excuse that's needed for this. Moscoso came out and had a dominant performance. His game plan was better, and that's okay to happen. You know what I mean? Like, Kane is the ultimate, right? He is the game. That's just what everyone else is challenging, and there's nothing wrong with saying that in his generation. There's a lot of people, and their records can speak louder than their words about how dominant this guy is. And for Moscoso to come in on courts that favor both of them, so maybe that's a neutralizer there, and he just has a better game plan put together. That's all it was. Kane's the kind of guy where he's hitting 90% on every level, whether it's the agility, it's the power, it's the game plan, it's the forehand, protecting the backhand, because let's talk about that. That's where a lot of, even though he's serving really well, that's where a lot of the non-putaways came from, was from that side. And ultimately, on the big points, Moscoso was finishing. Now, he leaves some of those balls up. He's dying on the cross. That's what he was doing. He's dying on the cross of those shots. He just happened to put them away. He played those pressure points, those balls you have to put down. He's playing far more superior. It happens. It was his day, but I truly believe he prepared for it. He visualized it. He prepared for it. He went out and he did it. This moment goes completely to Moscoso. Game 2 was phenomenal to watch.
Yeah. And in a lot of, it's worth noting that kind of like the 1980 U.S. hockey team, they beat Russia in the semis. They still had to finish off the final to get the gold. This was a semi, but it really felt, we're talking as if it was the tournament final. In reality, Conrado came back the next day, put a donut on a hot Andre Parrilla in game 1 before finishing off the final. So, props to Moscoso. He was really on this entire weekend.
Here's my hot take. Here's my hill I'm going to die on. I alluded to it before. With all due respect to Mr. Wozlenchuk, when it comes time for him to play his second of 2 matches on Saturday, he's going to run into a buzzsaw in Conrado Moscoso, and he's going down.
Yeah, it was good to see it translate in both singles and doubles. He wins with his countrymen and Kadim Carrasco, and it was just really good to see him have an absolutely dominant performance. We'll see if he can repeat it next year. But this really sets him up as he goes into the second half of the schedule and I'll be the first to admit, Kane might not live rent-free in his head anymore. This is a huge win, and it wasn't just accidental. There isn't any kind of, any kind of caveat you can put on this match. This was a dominant performance from Moscoso. So this makes racquetball interesting at the professional level.
Mm-hmm.
We start seeing that people can play at this level. Kane has set this bar. Let's make that very clear. But these guys are achieving it finally, and it's just really good to see the GOAT challenge.
Yeah, 100%. So with this tournament win, Conrado should move up to number 2 on tour. He still's got a little bit of a ways. These are rough estimates, but Kane has 1,890 points. Conrado now has 1,440s, and you get 420 points for a tournament win. So if we saw, for example, another Kane absence from a tour event like we saw a little bit ago when Kane missed an event because he had a prior personal engagement, and Moscoso shows up and gets a win, suddenly we're talking about a really tight race. And, this season is going to run all the way to June with a culminating event at the U.S. Open. And also keep in mind that Conrado missed a huge number of events, after he got a pretty serious injury last year. So in a lot of ways, Conrado is just kind of making up points where he didn't have any points prior. So that's going to really show us a tight race as we start getting into January, February, March.
So there will be some shuffling, and you're more accurate with that. But ultimately, what we're going to see as a result from this is we should see Kane 1 and Conrado catching up in the rearview mirror at number 2. Couple people drop. I think you talked about Montoya dropping down maybe a spot or 2. And Adam still trying to break in the top 10. We wonder where Jake's going to be in all this mix. So I'll tell you, these tournaments coming up, you have something to look forward to. We have this huge win coming up, right? Storylines. We have Conrado taking out Kane this tournament, Kane being the GOAT. We see people like Thomas Carter, Dean Carrasco playing some of their better, and Alan Natera playing some of their better balls of their career. We have players coming through injury, but they're coming out unscathed, which is really good. And then we have people who've won. We've got Montoya who's won, Acuna who's won. We've got obviously Kane and Moscoso. So we've got some serious players, some serious, tier 1 tour winners that are coming through to your next event, which makes this a very interesting second half of the season.
Absolutely. And I like the matchups that we're seeing here. Andre Parrilla is career 5-2 against Andres Acuna. They meet up in the semis, and Andre handles him, and so are we going to see more matchups like that? It kind of remains to be seen because you never know if you're going to get a full draw at each event. But the way that it's set up right now, if everyone shows up at the next event, we're probably going to, at least we get to see Kane and Moscoso on other side of the draw so that they can only meet in the final. I think that's what everybody likes to see. Well, that's it for us on Fantasy Fastbreak this week. I hope you enjoyed that quick recap of the SoCal Open. Thanks for listening. If you are finding this online and you want to subscribe, by all means, that helps us. Please follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Our next big IRT stop is 7 weeks from today. It'll be the 46th annual Lewis Stroke Pro-Am, one of the longest running pro events. They do great hospitality. They do a ton for the players, and it's always really well attended.
And just for everyone out there who's playing with us in Fantasy Fastbreak, you can always follow us on irttour.com, and you'll go under Fantasy Fastbreak and play along with us. The updates are coming this week, so make sure you check out the up-to-date results. Unfortunately, you're going to see Todd Boss above yours truly, but that's okay. Even the blind squirrel finds the acorn, guys. Thanks for joining us. We hope you have a great holiday season.